Welcome to Bounce Back Stronger, the podcast that explores ways to find peace and purpose no matter what happens. I'm your host, Donna Ferris, and today we have best-selling author and Thurber Prize winner John Kenney with us. A little about John. You may know John from his book, Love Poems for Married People, and his pieces in The New Yorker. But today I invited him to talk about his new book, I See You've Called in Dead. It explores themes close to many of our dear listeners' hearts: divorce, loss, and the courage to open ourselves to love again. I can't wait to dive in. Welcome, John. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute joy. And we've been talking beforehand, and I needed to turn on the record so that we could capture some of this. So I wanted to start right out with the book, which is right here. I read it over my vacation to Yellowstone, and then I turned it right over to my husband who read it. We loved it so much. Maybe talk a little bit about the book, a little synopsis, and then talk about why you focused on strangers at funerals as a centerpiece. So I'll just give you a second to give your
Sure.
synopsis here.
I'm the worst at elevator pitches, but it'll be a long elevator ride. It's the story, in a sentence, of an obituary writer who's afraid to live. He's a little stunted in his life. When we meet him at the beginning of the book, he's 44 years old, and 2 years earlier, his wife of 2 years left him for another guy who was far better looking and had an English accent. Our hero, Bud, is a little rocked by this, but he's also not as enamored of his job as he once was. And I think the weight of impending middle age is pushing him down a bit. And one evening in the opening pages, he goes on a blind date where the woman brings her old boyfriend to the date. It does not go well. And that evening, Bud goes home to get an email from his ex-wife informing him that her mother, his ex-mother-in-law, has passed away. Bud reads the obituary and in the alcohol-fueled days gets the terrible idea to write his own obituary, which he does as a lark, but accidentally publishes it on his news company's website, and chaos ensues. Ultimately, he ends up going to the wakes and funerals of strangers. Why does he do that? It has to do with a woman, like most things in men's lives. He meets a woman who, Harold and Maude, if you've ever seen that film,
Yep.
this woman has been through quite a difficult time in her life and feels that going to the wakes and funerals of strangers renews her faith is the wrong word, renews her understanding of the preciousness of life. There's a Tibetan Buddhist saying that if you think upon death 5 times a day, you will live a happy life. That's interesting to me because it's so counterintuitive to how I was brought up here in the United
Mhm.
States, in Boston, in the West. I grew up Irish Catholic, and so I've been to a lot of wakes and funerals. And I just turned 63, and I still to this day don't have much of a vocabulary to talk about death. It's this universal thing. We've all lost someone, probably many people in our lives if we're 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. And it's hard to talk about it. My knee-jerk reaction is to make light of it. It's hard to stay in the intensity of it and
Mhm.
the loss. And the character Bud certainly does not have the emotional bandwidth to do that.
I couldn't help while you were talking to think about how in reading the book, how in the beginning it was just a laugh riot, right? And I was really impressed with that. My husband kept going, "Why are you laughing so much?" And then, like you're talking about, there's certain realities around life that were revealed, and we're not going to reveal them in this conversation. But like you said, you come stark up to these realities. And it was beautiful to watch him have those moments, but then also figure a way to take them in more of a stride going forward, which I think is really a lot of the journey that we're talking about in this podcast. So it's really relevant.
Yeah, thank you. But I also want to make clear, I think there's this belief that writers know things. I am not of that belief. Tolstoy knew things, Shakespeare knew things, Virginia Woolf knew everything. There are writers who I admire deeply who I think really are thinking and expressing on a different plane. I'm not one of them. I'm still struggling mightily to figure out the whys and the hows. I think we all have these feelings and experiences that feel at the time unique and individual, and it's hard to express them sometimes. And I think the beauty of a book, a good book, is it just closes that gap. And it's, oh my God, I've felt that, I've experienced that. The only difference between me and my readers is that I write it down. That's it. We all feel these things. And as I say to my kids all the time, it's really hard to be a human. We're doing it for the first time. You know, we can watch some people do it. Maybe we can certainly watch a lot of people do it wrong, but we're going through this experience, adolescence and young love and midlife and divorce and the sudden death of a dear friend. We're going through it for the first time, and it's hard.
Yeah, and you can't tell anybody about it.
I don't think we can. You can
No.
try as a
Yeah.
parent, I can try, but ultimately it's like trying to describe water or
Yep.
sex, or it's, I can try, but
Yep.
ultimately it's ethereal.
You won't believe it until you experience it. I think I spend my whole life reliving what my mother experienced when I judged her about what she experienced, but now I'm experiencing it. And I'm sure there's many other people that have the same life, but it is just incredibly humbling.
Not the best though, because I was an angry young man and judged my poor dad, who was a World War II vet. We were very close for a long time. He was a World War II vet. He was in submarines.
Wow.
A child of the Depression, went into World War II for 3 years, 3 months in a submarine, became a firefighter, had 6 sons. His wife died quite suddenly when she was 49 years old. He was 48. But he brought up my little brother and I, and by the skin of our teeth and some government cheese. And I went through my weird phase in my 20s where I judged him for not being enough. And the day you stop doing that and realize all the amazing, wonderful things, and you sob uncontrollably for how bad you feel at having dared judge these beautiful people who committed their lives so that yours would be a little better, is a good day.
Yeah,
A really good day.
it is. It is. And it's part of this whole thing we've been talking about. It's part of the death and the cycle that we go
Yeah.
through, right? And I love the idea in the book about how precious life is and how we don't pay attention to it all that well. And that is being human. Sharon Salzberg, who I quote a lot, who's a big
Oh, she's
meditation
wonderful.
teacher, she says, "Oh, human, you're being human." But it is innately a thing that we
Yeah,
just
it's
take it for
weird.
granted.
We're wired wrong,
Yes.
and meditation and yoga certainly help rewire. I'm terrible at both because my brain doesn't work and I'm not very flexible. But I came across in the research for the book this epic Indian poem. I believe it's 2,000 years old, the Bhagavad Gita.
Yep.
I have not read the whole thing by any stretch, but I have read a section, and there's a wise person is asked, what is the greatest wonder in the world? And his answer is, the greatest wonder in the world is that every day people die, but the
Hmm.
living think they have nothing but time.
Yep.
That's me every day, getting
Hmm.
annoyed in traffic or mad because the coffee's too hot or just being human, just being human. Now, I catch myself a little faster. That's
Hmm.
the only improvement I've made. I
Hmm.
catch myself a little faster. I'm like, oh, don't do that.
Yeah.
Breathe,
Yeah.
breathe. Yeah, we are our own life's work. Our insecurities and anxieties and jealousies and wounds, right? We all walk around with these deep wounds and thinking we are separate and disparate from one another. And when we can connect just a little bit, I had an interesting thing happen to me yesterday. I hadn't realized that there was a gentleman driving a car and he was driving really slowly, and I thought he was going to pull into a space. So I pulled around and took a right. I think he felt clearly this was really egregious and he started honking. And I had to pull over because I was on a call. He was older and had a handicap plate and looked like life hadn't been very kind to him. And he came up to my window. And I was like, I had to get off the call. And I said, what is it? He goes, you cut me off. I said, I'm so sorry. His whole energy changed because I think he thought I was going to be a jackass or something. I was like, and I got out and I was like, I'm really sorry. He goes, oh, that's okay. I'm just having a really bad day.
Oh.
And I was like, I'm so sorry. And he put his hand, he goes, what's your name? And I said, John. He goes, I'm Jack. And I said, Jack, are you Irish? He goes, yeah. I said, I get it, man. I get it. And he said, have a good day. And it's giving me chills because he was this beautiful person who was he was in his stuff.
Yeah.
The Tibetan Buddhists call it Shenpa, the sticky stuff where you can't get out of your thoughts in your head and our raw humanity that gets in the way of life. And that's been huge parts of my life. And certainly the character's life. And
Yeah.
if we can get out of our way a little bit, it's like when the clouds clear, when you fly up out of the, it's all a cloudy, crummy day, and it's, oh, wow, it's blue out here.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean it's always like this? There's a lovely poem by the Irish-born, but he lives in England, poet David White. It's called Everything is Waiting for You. And it makes my heart swell because as a yoga teacher and a meditator, it's always waiting for you. It's always waiting for you. And it's just hard to access some days.
Yeah. So part of the reason that the tag on my this podcast and in the book is finding peace and purpose no matter what happens. It's this idea that, like you say, it's always there for you. But I think it's hard to know that unless you've been exposed to people that believe that way, you've done some reading. It's really hard to believe that. Even though in every benediction in most Christian churches, and it actually shows up in other religions too, we say the peace that passes all understanding. And I think I said that for decades before really understanding what that meant. So I think just to tag on to what you said, I think that's an important thing to bring up is that we can find happiness. It's the Viktor Frankl. He found his way to some semblance of, boy, may be the wrong word, but lightness, even in the concentration camps. And that's what he writes about. And that's a thing that if you can do that, then you can
Yeah,
survive.
yeah, and it's interesting. I did a talk a couple of weeks ago with a remarkable woman, Betsy Stevenson. She wrote a memoir called Blackbird about her son's suicide. He was 21 years old, just a beautiful kid. And it would be too easy to say that on the other side of profound pain is not joy is the wrong word, and I don't mean to say
Mm-hmm.
joy.
The hard word.
I do think from Betsy, from people I know who have had horrible things happen to them, the death of a child, awful trauma, that while there's not, and again, forgive me, it's not joy, because it's not a yin yang kind of thing. It's like you see behind a curtain. It's this Wizard of Oz thing where you see differently than most people. And for Betsy, I think the grief's always going to be there. But I have a tendency to run from grief because I'm afraid of it. I don't want to deal with it. In my experience, and I don't want to speak like I know what I'm talking about. This is just my experience because I barely graduated college and my SAT scores were really bad. But grief is really patient and it's going to
Mm-hmm.
wait while you run from it, are afraid of it, drink yourself out of it, eat yourself out of it. Whatever you try, it will wait and it will be there. And it will wait for you to say, I give up. What do we do now? And it'll say, I'm not going anywhere. How big do you want me to be? Because there is a little bit of hope. There is resilience. There is the possibility to live again from the death of your mother, from the death of a child, from the death of your spouse. Everyone listening to this is listening to it because I think we've all experienced this terrible stuff. The genesis for the writing of this book was the death of my brother Tom. As I said, I'm one of six boys. In 2019, as I was writing this book, before it came out, my brother Michael died. And I wrote his obituary 2 months before the book came out, which was a
Mm.
bizarre thing. I think the sooner we're able to sit with the profound pain of death and loss, and really sit with it, the sooner the opportunity for not healing, but moving forward. And I don't think I said that very eloquently, but I hope it made
Did
sense.
pretty well. Did pretty well. That was amazing. And maybe it just comes to my mind, like, how does writing work for you in terms of going through these times? So you mentioned the obituary, writing the book. How does that work for you? I think that it's another theme that we try to talk about a lot is the creativity and how it helps us transform these energies into something
Sure.
purposeful and helpful for us.
Yeah. Before I give a boring answer to that, let me just say that writing when I was a kid and in high school and college was always this sort of this impossible thing. That this is a magical thing. It's not something I could ever do. I was always interested in it. When I first saw comedy that spoke to me, I was 13 years old, and on Sunday evening, I happened to be watching the local PBS station in Boston, WGBH. And my mother had died not long before, and this show comes on at 9 o'clock, and I was just like, there was a naked man sitting on a piano bench at the beach, and he just says, and now for something completely different, and it's John Cleese. And I'm like, what's this? And it saved me.
Mm.
Comedy saved me because I'm not Virginia Woolf and I'm not Jonathan Franzen and I'm not Alice McDermott. And the things that interest me are profound pain and profound ridiculousness. Because in my life, they tend to work like a DNA strand. And so to find that kind of thing at a young age was so life affirming. That can exist at the same time that I can feel really terrible. And so that's a long-winded way of saying I was kept back in the first grade because I couldn't read. Reading was always this sort of traumatic thing for me. It took me a long time to become a reader. Not even in high school, really the beginnings were in college. I couldn't write to save my life.
Wow.
But I worked at it and I worked at it and I worked at it. And I say that only because I'm fairly confident that someone listening wants to write or is a writer and has maybe the insecurity or anxiety that says, geez, I'm not a writer. And I would love to say to that person, yes, you are. Yes, you are. Somerset Maugham had a great line. He said, there are three rules for writing a novel. Unfortunately, no one knows what they are. That's the greatest advice I've ever heard because I think there is this belief, just like when you're in junior high, that everyone else has it figured out and that you alone are lost. We come to learn this is a universal thing. The only rules about writing are to do it. That's it. To be kind to yourself, to get the words down. To learn how to do it, all you have to do is read. Just read as much as you can. Read everything you can. See how it's done. See what works for you. See what doesn't work for you. Find your own voice. Anyway, for me, at this point in my life, it's all I do. Besides watch baseball and try to be a good dad, it's all I do is try to put stuff down. And 97% of the time, it's useless and drivel, but there's a little something in there. The genesis of the book came from my brother Tom's death in 2019. He was a firefighter, like my father and both of our grandfathers, and it's all he ever wanted to be. He was at ground zero, and we think
Mm.
breathing in the toxic stuff for 7 days was ultimately what gave him pancreatic cancer. And so he died a peaceful death, surrounded by his brothers and his amazing wife, a hospice care nurse, and his two grown daughters. He was a beautiful soul. And so my brothers and I would go and visit him. They would come down from Boston and I'd drive up from New York. And the last time we saw him, I arrived early or first. And we were chatting, and he was much thinner. He's a big, strong, handsome Irish guy with a handlebar mustache and tough as nails and but putty around his two girls. And he had done amazing things. He had saved lives and he had run
Mm.
into burning buildings. And he was the guy you wanted when the shit hit the fan. He was the guy you wanted there. Anyway, he was sitting under a blanket. It was a cool spring day on Cape Cod where he lived. And we chatted for a bit. And I heard a car pull into the driveway. It was my other four brothers. And I turned to Tom and I said, the others are here. And with this sort of Buster Keaton-like quickness and stoned face, he dropped an arm off the chair and his head went to one side. But with this little grin on his face, he said, tell them they're too late. And I thought, how can you make a joke at a time like this? You're going to be dead in 2 weeks. And yet, in the face of the great unknown, he can find the grace and the courage and the humor to say that. And I thought, I want that. I
Mm.
want a funny book about death because it's a terrifying thing and everyone's upset. And I always find those moments at wakes where people are crying, but then you move and friends, and then you start telling stories and you're laughing.
Yep.
I love that the weird emotions at wakes where you're supposed to be one way, but you remember the time we went to the thing and I love that and I wanted that.
Yeah, it's the holding two things at one time, and also, which I love, and it's also the fact that you don't see people. It's like the four weddings and a funeral, right? We don't see people except for these big occasions, and it is a really great time to connect, even though it's probably one of the hardest days of our lives.
Yeah, and I also think something happens, the holding two things at once, the dialectical nature of life is really interesting to me. I think it was Scott Fitzgerald who said the mark of a first-rate mind is someone who could hold opposing thoughts at the same time. And I think that's not in vogue in the
Mm.
world we live in anymore, this
Mm.
siloed world, right? We read and watch our world. It comes to us instead of, and if someone doesn't have our views or watch our shows or whatever, it's not that they have a different opinion. They're wrong or bad. I love the idea that playing gracefully with ideas and being able to debate gracefully and respectfully, and that's a far more interesting place for me than just it's this way or this way. The other thing I think about wakes and funerals is we're really raw then. It's one of our better selves because we shed artifice and we connect with other people. And I don't know about you, but when I leave a wake or funeral, I'm in this sort of different state. It's like after a good meditation or a good yoga class, you're really, I don't want to say present, but you're really alive and you just feel something before the onslaught of traffic and I got to get to CVS before it closes and the kids and you what so I love that state. So anyway,
It's almost like a different dimension. I'm coming back to some of the times I've been in it. It's like
yeah,
almost like another dimension of sorts.
and depending on how far you want to go down that road of thought, that dimension's there too. And we can access it. It's hard, but it's there. I don't do it very often. Yeah, but it is always there.
Yeah, yeah, that
I feel
was
like I'm not
amazing.
doing a very good job talking about the book. You know what we should do?
You're
Delete
doing a
this. We're going to start again.
no, we're not.
Let's start
No,
again.
you've done a great job. I would love to maybe turn a little bit to the New Yorker articles. And the one I picked was withholding sex from my wife, which was hysterical to me. And then the other one was what the Pope was like as a kid. I think it's the thing that you were just talking about, these deep subjects, but the absurdity of things that you
Yeah.
bring together. Can you talk
Yes.
a little bit about that? And that's a gift for humor, but also a gift for the absurd, which is, I think, really a good way to flesh out these types of topics.
Yeah, I don't talk that intelligently about humor because I don't know how to talk about it. I guess for me, I'm the product of a time and a place. I grew up in late 60s, early 70s Boston, and I grew up among funny people who the darker the event, the more opportunity for lightness and absurdity. And
Yeah.
I've always loved that. I remember the day of my mother's funeral, and we were all in the back of a Cadillac, which was amazing. And I was 12, and my brother Tom, we were all there. And the mourners had pulled into the cemetery and they're out of their cars. And as we were going by, we had to stop at St. Joseph's Cemetery in West Roxbury, one of the neighborhoods in Boston. And there's a beautiful building there, but there's a U.S. Postal Service truck. And my brother Tom says, "Oh, this must be the dead letter office." And we start laughing, except we're driving by all these mourners and we're in the car like laughing. And the sort of that what they're seeing is,
Oh my God.
I don't know. For me, it's a long day if you can't find something funny. It's a really long day. Look, I know things are serious and there are very serious subjects, but I happen to be one of those people like John Cleese or Ricky Gervais. Absolutely believe nothing is off limits. Tastefully, I hope, tastefully.
Yes.
But yeah, life's pretty absurd to me. Like
I
I
think
take my responsibility as a husband very seriously and as a dad seriously. And I care deeply about the quality of my writing. If someone's going to spend 15 or $20 for one of my books, it matters deeply to me that it's the best I can do. That said, I think life is absurd. I don't understand it. I'm getting closer to the end of it. My people don't live long. I'm 63. I hope to make it another 5 years, but
people don't live
they
long.
don't, they just keep dropping like flies. But yeah, I want to go out laughing. I don't know of a better feeling. When someone makes me laugh, my kids are really funny.
That's got
They
to be a
cheat.
joy for you.
They just make me laugh. And I have a couple of friends who can just, it's the best, especially when times are dark. My brothers and I would get together with my brother Mike, who died in February, and he had glioblastoma, a brain tumor. And fortunately he lived for a year, but for 11 months, he was right as rain. And we would get together and we would make fun of him and say, "We want to see the x-rays, the CAT scans. We don't believe you have a brain tumor," because he had this incredible memory and he looked great. And he was like, "I do, I swear." And we're like, "We don't believe you." But that was another interesting thing. We were all in the room when he died. And that was the first time I'd ever been. I missed my father's death by a day because I had to get back to New York because it was my daughter's birthday. But we were all in the room. And that
Mm.
was quite a intense experience. It was oddly beautiful because he was ready and he was in no pain. His wife and two daughters, his brothers, and two of his best friends. And it was like this meditation for 3 hours. We played music. He loved Allman Brothers and the Doobie Brothers and Steely Dan
Very
and
cool.
Van Morrison. And then we stopped playing the music. And it was February and the sun's starting to go down and it was a bitterly cold Boston day. And It was like a natural meditation where we just stopped talking and must have been an hour and a half where we just stood there. I'm a lapsed Catholic. I've tried many things. I will say I felt something in that moment, 5:12 in the afternoon. It was really something. And I still believe his energy is with me. I came across something, I think it was, I didn't do well in physics, but the first law of thermodynamics says that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. And
Mhm.
when a human body is energy, and so when we die, that energy goes someplace. It doesn't end, it goes someplace. That gets into a whole nother realm that I'm not qualified to talk about, but I'm fascinated by it. Is it my imagination that I'm feeling my brother Mike when I'm thinking of him, or is it him? I don't know, but I'm open to the possibility of it. It makes me feel really good. So,
I really appreciate you sharing that. And that's something that I have had as well.
can we
And
talk a little about your memoir? And you said you've been through some losses. If I can ask you
sure.
about that, would that be okay?
Yeah, that would be great. So it's interesting. So I had somebody that I lost. It was a love of mine in February, and I happened to be there for his passing, which I think is an honor in a lot of ways. I've talked to a lot of different people about the passing of a loved one and whether they're in the room or not. And I think that is an honor if you're allowed to be there and it happens that way. And I've had that spirit him come back quite a bit. Different types of signs, different types of things that have happened when I feel like I needed his presence. And so I think it's great that you talked about that you're experiencing that too. It's one of the ways to helps us handle death better, I think, in knowing that we do pass on. It's not over. They're always with us, not just in our memories, but in and around us. So I love that. And that's one of the things that I learned through the memoir that I wrote. And some spirits come back that don't want to come back necessarily, but they do. And but that's good too. I think all of it is are things that we learn from and help us get through that difficult time of grief.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hate to say it, I'm looking at time. What did I not ask, or what do you want to share with listeners before we go?
Oh, that is a good question and a hard one. What do I want to share? I'm not sure I have a good answer. My 16-year-old daughter has feelings. She's crazy smart and funny and talented, but she is afflicted with what Churchill called the black dogs, which is, I think, she gets from me. I've struggled mightily with depression a goodly portion of my life, and thank God for humor. But I think the times we live in are difficult and challenging and sometimes mean-spirited and cruel. And adding the death of a loved one to that can be overwhelming. I have seen so much more beauty and kindness in my life that has outweighed all. And I do believe that stuff is always there. We just don't read about it. What I tell my daughter when she's overwhelmed by these things, and I wish I would tell myself more, is this too shall pass. Because in the moment, in grief or pain or depression, the insidious thing about it is it lies to you and it says, oh, this is how you're going to feel forever. You're not going to feel differently. And it's so painful, the grief, the loss. It's so painful. Someone I know quite well who lost his son uttered these words that day to a dear friend who came to the house and hugged him. And he said, how am I supposed to live? And I think maybe all of us have felt that way at times. As someone who's felt really bad in his life, the only true thing I know is that it will pass. I know that. I know it will pass. And we will feel differently. We will laugh again. We will love again. We will go for a walk with a friend where we feel a little better. That's the only thing I know to be true. Besides, the Bruins will win the Stanley Cup this year.
And that is a perfect end to a podcast. Thank you so much for the book, for the New Yorker articles. I just love them, and for this time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. My pleasure. That's all for today. If you're interested in learning more about John's books and writing, those links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. If it was, please subscribe, drop a review, or share it with your friends and family. That's the best way to get it in the hands of those who may benefit. And if my daughters Sienna and Sylvia are listening, I just want you to know how proud I am of you. And I love you so much. Bye now.